It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this virtual opening of Encountering Resonance, Aaron Kuffner Gamelatron. And my name is Sam Quigley. I've got the pleasure of being the director here. And tonight I'm also actually running the Zoom connection. So welcome one and all. Tonight is the third virtual opening of an exhibition here at the Lyman Allyn Art Museum that we've done in the last 4 weeks. It's been a busy time here. I'm not quite sure how that happened, but it has been the case. And we've been busy, but we are very happy to be able to open all these great shows and sort of welcome in the spring with new hope and gusto for the future. Tonight is going to be a little bit different, however, from the other couple of shows that we've recently opened, because those are mostly visual. Now, to be certain, this show is very visual as well, but it's got a big acoustic component, a musical component as well. And I'm sure you'll see that and hear that very soon. But with that, I'd just like to make a note that if you happen to have a Bluetooth speaker or some other kind of way to augment the quality of your audio, that would be great, because I think that we're going to hear some very low tones and some high tones as well. So try to get your speaker going as well as you can. I'm very glad that you're here to help us celebrate Encountering Resonance, Aaron Taylor Kuffner's Gamelatron. And I do wish we could be all gathering here in our galleries, because it's quite an experience that you should have. However, I think this is about the best we can do for now. I would say, however, that the museum is open so that you can come and join and enjoy the show by yourself. It's just that we can't have the hundreds of people that we'd like to have in one gallery at one time right now. I'm very grateful that Aaron, you're here. You're in the top corner of my first screen, so that seems to be right where you should be, the star of the show. Thank you for being here, Aaron.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great. And I'm really looking forward to sharing your work with everybody here, because I dare say it's a possibility that some people may not really know too much about what the Gamelatron is. So we're going to give you a little bit of a preview about that, and then we're going to have a chance to talk with Aaron about it. The topic of the Gamelatron, as some of you may know, is very near and dear to my heart. I was a student of this gamelan tradition for many years. And in fact, I got into the whole question of how do these instruments get made as well. So I am particularly interested in having this show here at the museum. And I want to say a great thanks to Aaron for in revitalizing or rather perhaps reinvigorating, maybe is the better term, the art of making bronze hand-forged instruments in Java by virtue of his new creations and installations, kinetic as sculptures that they are. He has created a whole new demand for these instruments, and I think that he's breathed life back into this tradition, which may have been losing some practitioners. So Aaron, thank you for that as well, on top of everything else. Before I end these remarks, I want to thank a number of people who have made this possible. Of course, Aaron is the first and foremost of them. He has worked tirelessly to make these musical kinetic sculptural installations, and we're very grateful for the results. And I'm hopeful that everybody here who will get a taste of it tonight will make their way here to the museum to see them and experience them and feel them in their very bones in our galleries. I'd also like to express my great gratitude to the amazing team that prepped and installed the galleries. And of course, I'm referring to our registrar and director of exhibitions, Jane LeGros, who has always, made miracles happen. And sometimes at the last minute, no matter what the technologies are involved. So thanks, Jane, for your work. And Tanya Port and other members of our collection staff, Sydney O'Day and Thierry and Chrissy Winkler. Thank you all. And I also want to express our gratitude to the Frank Loomis Palmer Foundation of the state and the state of Connecticut's Department of Economic and Community Development, and also an anonymous foundation for the generous support for all of the things in our exhibition program. Backing us up all here is the fantastic group of trustees who always manages to, come through every circumstance. And I'm glad to see many of you here tonight. And I think that's about the end of my mentioning of all the thanks that I feel for all these wonderful people. I want to give you an idea about the end, what to expect tonight. We're going to be taking a look at the exhibition through the means of video and still photography and some music as well. Like I said, if you can get your speakers going, that would be really great. And after that, we're going to have a conversation with Aaron, and then we'll open up to questions for everybody. And by the way, if you could keep your microphones muted, that will help in the sound quality for everybody. And also, I'd like to suggest that you could propose questions or comments via the chat box as well. And that way we can manage to give voice to them later on in the evening. So without further ado, I'm going to try to share my screen and share this slide presentation we have of Aaron's exhibition. And then we'll hear some of the sounds, and then we'll get on to the Q&A and discussion. So give me a moment here and sit back and relax, and we'll take a look at the Gamelatron here at the Lyman Allyn Art Museum. We're going to start off with a movie. It takes around 5 minutes or so, and then we'll go into some stills. So now we'll take some stills and you can take another look at the gallery in a different mode. So that's our show and our vision of the connection. Yes, yes, yes. And now would be the time when we might just start talking with Aaron a little bit about what we've just seen. Aaron, you might want to unmute your microphone so we can be able to hear your own thoughts about it.
All right, I'm unmuted.
There we are. Good.
Actually,
Well,
I'm very curious what what other people what questions you have, because I know what it looks like and feels like and sounds like. It doesn't necessarily translate always through video and the audio, of course, especially with the buffering on top of it being like really low frequencies or really high frequencies.
right.
But I'm curious more like, what questions do people that just watch that have than me telling you?
Sounds right.
Aaron?
Yeah, Lori.
Yeah, hi.
Nice to see you, by the way. How are you?
I'm great, and I feel so much better just listening to that. And I can't wait to sit in the middle of those three big gongs. So, did you actually make the gongs? Some of the gongs that you're using?
Yeah. So the process with the gongs, there's a couple different processes. For the ones inside Roa Gong, which is the blue room with the pink dots, those are all made from bronze, and they're hot forged in Java, in central Java in Indonesia. And so with that, it's like 10 parts copper, 3 parts tin, melted together, and then hot hammered into shape. You heat it up in a coal fire, you hammer it till it's too cold to form, and then you put it back in the fire and you go back and forth for days in order to get the shape. And then after we do that process, which I have a team in Indonesia that does that. I've worked with them many times. I've done hammering with them. They're the masters and I'm usually just cheap labor. And then they ship that back to me in Brooklyn. And then I do cold forging on it, meaning I hammer them in different ways to kind of perfect the pitch I want or to voice it in unique ways. And then I do a lot of surface finishing, changing, polishing, turning them different colors or just turning them more into art objects beyond just the sound they make. For the really big gongs, those are made from steel because the bronze gongs we make get really brittle when they get so big. And so steel has more tensile strength, meaning it can be bigger and not be as fragile because it can kind of flex a little bit versus the bronze, which is more rigid. So to make the really big gongs, I've done a mix, like I kind of prototyped with the guys in Indonesia because they're not used to making such big gongs because the frequencies are outside of the tradition that they're drawing on. And I'm kind of going into these sub-bass frequencies in the 30, 40 hertz range that they don't have in their musical tradition. So they have no need to make it that way. And so some of them are made in Indonesia and then I ship them, but they're so big that they're really cumbersome to ship and they actually don't ship so well. So I actually make those as well out of my shop in Brooklyn. And I've made some that are even bigger because I'm able to get stock in the States that they can't, that we can't really find so easily in Indonesia. So I've made ones that are like 150 centimeters. So it's like 5 feet.
Wow.
Could I interject that there are several videos that one can see in the Learning Center, and one of them is about Aaron's processes once the bronze instruments have arrived to Brooklyn, what he does for them. So when you come to the museum, you can take a look at that. And by the way, those zip videos will be also on our website so that you can see them from afar.
Yeah. But you can't hear, it doesn't translate very well to video or audio because the way that I made the piece is in such low frequency that I want you to feel it with your body. The way that, say, you feel a diesel engine vibrating, it's not something you hear it, but we forget sometimes that our entire body is actually a receptacle for sound, not just the few small bones that vibrate in the ear. And so the piece is really made to have like a physical encounter with. So it doesn't translate so well to video, but you get the idea that you have these 5-foot diameter gongs that you're sitting in between that just pulse these low frequencies. It's kind of like, it's like being in a womb a little bit. Not
Yeah,
I
I,
remember that.
that, as soon as I saw the stool there, I was like, oh my God, I can't wait to go. And my second question, actually, you sort of touched upon a little bit. I have never heard any traditional gamelan music. I know they used to have a gamelan ensemble up at Bard, right up the
Still, I
road here. Do they still?
think so, yeah. Balinese.
But
Yeah.
my question is, is your music out, you've already said that it's outside of the hertz, the actual range of the tones, but is your music based on or on the gamelan tradition, or have you ever tried to transcribe some traditional music into your creations?
Yeah, great questions. So I definitely am influenced by that music, but I deviate from it pretty far. The first part is that they have two main tuning systems that are not Western. One's a 7-note tuning system, one's a 5-note tuning system. And in a lot of the Gamelatrons, most of the Gamelatrons do not follow those 5 or 7-note tuning systems. I developed my own tuning system that is not Western or Indonesian or anything else. Sometimes it has only 1 or 2 primary notes. Sometimes it has 10. Every piece is different. So that already, the structure of it, the tonality of it would be different. For the piece that actually is at Lyman Allyn, that is in Slendro, which is one of the traditional tuning systems. So in theory, I could transpose traditional songs and have it play it back. But I find that the way the mechanisms work, it doesn't lend to the same kind of playing that humans do. And so rather than trying to get it to do something that it's like kind of not fit to do, I try to work with the technology so that the compositions play the kinds of songs that they're good at. And so I kind of compose based on that. And to believe it or not, even though I kind of made a robotic system, most of my compositions are actually much quieter, slower, more kind of like intentional, methodic than the traditional gamelan, which often is kind of more of a full regalia, and is much more performance where it has an ebb and a flow and a rise and a fall, and then it's over. So I'm really trying to break the boundaries and do nonlinear compositions where you can walk in and you don't feel like you missed the beginning, or you can leave and not feel like you missed the end, but rather has this kind of like atmospheric nuance. And I'm a lot of times doing much slower compositions because you don't have that same like performer on stage feeling versus audience. You can have a more intimate, close connection with it, and therefore the songs don't really have to follow that same traditional arc of people expecting, to kind of unravel these tensions in such short amount of time. So both the tonality and the style of music is pretty far off from what traditional gamelan would be.
So Aaron, you have studied in Indonesia and studied gamelan there, but how did you get interested in gamelan to begin with? Where did that come from?
Yeah, I studied at the Institute Seni Indonesia in Yogyakarta for 3 years. And then I also did kind of my own private tutoring and such in both Bali and in Surakarta, both to learn how to make instruments as well as with just different masters and different traditions that I was interested in. Because gamelan is kind of it's almost like saying Western classical. It doesn't have to mean one thing, and different regions and different time periods have different styles of music, which are very different from each other, different tunings and things like that. So it's one big catchphrase. It's not like there's just one static form. So there's a lot to study, like Western classical, where there's so many different periods. I actually got interested in it really in Indonesia, which is strange because most of the Westerners that most Westerners would be already exposed to gamelan, maybe at college, or like at Bard or something like that. And then they would want to get more into it. Maybe they were an ethnomusicologist, and then they would go back to the source to learn more. And I was more of a painter. I had a theater group. I had done street art. I also was a musician and electronic music producer and had done a lot of different arts. And I'd been exposed a little bit to gamelan, but it wasn't something I knew much about. I was in Indonesia really just traveling, and then went to meet with a friend from San Francisco who would fit a little more the normal bill, where she had played gamelan in college and was really interested in it, and then had enrolled in this school to learn more about it. And I visited her, and she really reintroduced me to it. And it just kind of like the door opened every time I listened to it in Indonesia, that I just became more and more curious about it. And so it wasn't a plan. You know, I didn't go there for gamelan, but I feel like it's the thing that I found which kept me there so long and really pulled me in, and I saw more depth to it. It's also the way I experienced culture too, is because the gamelan, the way it's used in Indonesia is so intertwined with a lot of the traditional cultural happenings. And so it gave me a deeper insight into the culture as well, which all of it just became more and more fascinating the more that I studied. So I stayed longer and longer, and now, you know, go back often.
Well, we're lucky you did. Can I ask a sort of a follow up on that, which is, you mentioned sort of the, you know, how it's tied into other maybe traditional art forms, but it's also tied into a larger sense of community that's very sort of specific to Indonesian culture. And in, you know, you've talked before about, I'm probably going to say it wrong, but gotong royong, and this idea of shared experiences. Could you explain a little bit about that, and how gamelan feeds that, or is representative of that? Or, I mean, you don't feel like you have to give a lecture, but you know, it's such an interesting concept, and you really saw it firsthand when you were living there in, you know, in the community.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a topic that's worth like a lecture, not by me, but, you know, but gotong royong is it's this kind of concept. It loosely translates to like working together, kerja bersama, where the idea, roughly, generally, is that by doing kind of like community projects where everyone works together on that project, that becomes a pillar of democracy, a way to coalesce a community around doing things. And it can be something as simple as this, like the village I was living in. There were ladies one morning, early in the morning, lined up in kind of like a V formation. Imagine like a snowplow, but of people with brooms, sweeping like the you know, gravel road in front of our houses, just kind of cutting down the main street in the village. And I was like, well, you know, what are you doing? And they're like, oh, it's gotong royong. It's like, we all are coming together today to do this kind of civic thing as a group. And, you know, later in the day, we were moving like a huge pile of sand from that had like kind of deposited to a different place in the village where it wouldn't be in the way. And we were just doing it like one bucket at a time and kind of having a cup of tea in between each one. And the idea was that everyone in the village did this thing together. So we had this common bond where we could say, oh, remember that day where we swept for hours, or we carried all those things over here. And they were really coalesced, and we felt like we were working towards a common goal. And so in Indonesia, they have like 5 pillars of their democracy, and one of the pillars is this gotong royong. And one of the highest forms of expressing this working together is gamelan. And that the music kind of dogmatically follows that concept, in that it's about playing together as one. There are very seldomly, almost never, solos or improvisation. There's sometimes embellishments you can do and such, but the idea is really that like everyone is kind of spokes on the same wheel, and that they're playing off each other and in total lock sync together. And that's this expression that like the whole together working towards a common purpose is greater than the sum of its parts. And so gamelan is used as an exercise in Gotong Royong.
Okay.
And so the follow-up to this, and I'm just going to catch it before someone else says it, is like, hey, you made a robot that plays all these instruments with no humans at all.
No people.
Oh, the blasphemy of it. And if I saw gamelan as its only purpose was to be an expression of this cultural ideal, namely Gotong Royong, then yes, that's blasphemous. But as we all know, music, gongs, sound can play so many different roles. And the Indonesians, because of their cultural ideals, they chose to have the music follow that ideal. But the sounds, the vibration, all these different things, you know, can be used in so many different ways. If you think of like a palette of paints, one culture, and based on what they see as the most important thing, would paint certain kinds of pictures that would express that. But it would not be blasphemous to take those same colors and to make a different painting with it. And so that's kind of what I've done, is that I've stripped away a lot of the dogma behind traditional gamelan, but I've recognized the essence, the power, the sonic vibrations that are important to the human experience. And I've tried to make a different shell for people to be able to experience it, even if they're not like a Balinese Hindu, or, you know, trying to embody the principles of Gotong Royong. Instead, I'm trying to create a venue for people to be able to have these encounters with residents without having to necessarily be identify with that culture, but rather can meet them wherever they are at, and they can apply it to whatever kind of spiritual or dogmatic practice that they have. So it's a little more inclusive. And yeah, so I think that probably more than answered, hopefully.
Yeah, no, that was great. That it's such an interesting concept, and one that we don't always, you know, we have similar concepts here, but not like that. So it's interesting, and it is interesting that, you know, you did take this instrument, this ensemble that is played by many, and now it is being played essentially by one in absentia, basically. And but you did, in early iterations, you played the Gamelatron, right? And you changed that up because you wanted to remove the performer, or remove the sort of ego from the middle of it. Is that right?
Yeah, well, when you see the pieces now, it's easy to think that this was the goal all along.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that I work, and have always worked artistically, is I do something enough in order to be able to see it, and then let that kind of drive towards its next iteration.
Mm-hmm.
And so with the Gamelatron, when it began, I worked with a guy named Eric Singer, who makes robotic musical instruments, and I kind of augmented his beating mechanisms in order to play the gamelan. And then I kind of had a stage show where I'm up there like with pad controllers and laptop, and I have a backing band of robots, which was interesting. But at the same time, I felt like there was a lot of boundaries there, because you have the performer versus audience, you have the whole time paradigm of like the beginning and the end of a thing. And I started realizing that what's unique about the robots is that, actually, you know, I'll frame this a little different. And this is mostly for Sam, because he can relate, because we had this experience, because we both played gamelan.
Well,
You're sitting right saturated, but then you step away and you go to where the audience might be, or where the practitioners of Balinese Hinduism might be during a ritual or something. And it feels light. It doesn't feel the same way. And you realize the best seat in the house is sitting right in the middle. And I started realizing that I have a unique opportunity with the technology in order to make a much more intimate setting for an audience, where they can become really close to it. And they can even just have like, put the music in front and get the performer out, so that you don't have to consider like the ego having person that's there, but rather, you know, the work is more impeccable than me. So the less that I'm there, the more that people can just encounter directly with the sonic experience. No performer versus audience, no boundary in that way, and no like ego having artist that even has to filter it, and rather you can be more intimate with it. And that's been an evolution over the first few years of doing this project that kind of revealed itself to me just from, you know, doing it over and over again and saying, what's really successful here? What's unique here? What is a more valuable gift to give?
I think it really comes across that it is a kind of a gift when you're in the space with the music playing. It's, you do feel like it's very womb-like. It's very much you're sort of enveloped by the music. And the idea that it's not a performance where there's someone who you are observing and you are sort of taking it in. It's very much you bring your own, you bring everything of yourself to it, and you take away, you interact with it in that way, in whatever way. It's informed by what's going on inside you at that moment too. So I think when you have a performance with music, you are, you go and you see live music, and you are just observing, and you're enjoying it, you're taking it in, but there is a kind of like person to person interaction that is, you present differently when there's another person in the room. And when you think about things differently, or different sets of things when there's another person in the room. But when you're by yourself in one of these spaces, just enveloped by the music, then you're, there's that sort of invitation to stillness, and an invitation to sort of go deeper into yourself, which is really a wonderful gift to be able to give people.
Great.
So
I'm glad you feel that way, because that's all in my intention. And part of the, like, I hope that, yeah, I just feel like I've created these installations with the intention that people can have as intimate of an experience as possible with them. And that I realize me not being involved, even just like I often will not show my face, I will not let anyone know, it doesn't matter. I don't matter in there. And so realizing that getting myself out of there as a barrier, and try to create it so that it's more of an open platform for you to encounter it as yourself, without any whatever would hamper you from doing that. I try to remove those barriers and present the artwork in a way to facilitate that.
If I may just add on that one, having had some experience in Indonesia of listening to music, I can tell you that there is a fine art of not listening to the music, particularly. There is, music is an essential part of a wedding, for example, or other kinds of life rituals. And as magnificent as it may be, somehow it seems a bit not to the point to show great attention to listening to it. And so as much as I might have been drawn to wanting to watch every nuance, every muscle, every aspect of the performance, I learned to have to sort of hang back and sort of feign a disinterest in listening to it. So when it comes to listening now to Aaron's Gamelatron, I can walk into the gallery, and I hope you'll have this same experience, and I feel like I'm a young kid again with, wide eyes and ears open, and just, as Jane said, enveloped in the sound, but wanting to throw myself even deeper into it. And without any musicians or observers to be watching my reactions, I feel liberated again to just dive into this musical bath. And it's a wonderful experience. And I've done it quite a few times in the last couple of days. And I find too that the music is constantly changing so that it never gets old. So without trying to be too much of an advertisement guy, there's good reasons to come here to visit and experience this Gamelatron.
Thanks, Sam.
You betcha.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I had a question. you know, Erin, as I was handing you things and assisting as you were installing, and we were talking a little bit about sort of exhibitions as experiential attractions almost, or, you know, the way in which people are really excited by exhibitions now and art that involves the viewer and spectator in unusual ways, and kind of draws on the senses, you know, is really something that people have been excited by in the last, you know, decade or so at least, and going back further. But it's neat and fascinating for me to think a little bit about your work and this ability to sort of focus on sound and also the kind of vibrations throughout your body as an analog to things that other artists are doing, like James Turrell, who creates these pieces with light, you know, and these subtle sort of changes in light that, you know, when you're in a very kind of focused space can give you this sort of transcendental experience, or, you know, a really interesting kind of way to isolate certain senses. And I wondered if, you know, your work, as you're sort of thinking about it in a presentation mode, if you see those connections to some ways that, you know, other artists are also kind of pushing boundaries in terms of engaging the senses in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And bringing up James Turrell as like an example, I think that, okay, so, gosh, how do I approach this? One, the trend that Tanya and I were talking about is where there's more of these experiential happenings, you know, versus it's different, a little different from theater, but has elements of it. It's a little different than movies, but have elements of going to a movie and such. Something like Meow Wolf or Sleep No More, if you know that. These kind of things that fall into this gray space where you have to kind of participate and be inside of, and you know, it's almost like an escape room would be in that world too. And that this being part of the zeitgeist of entertainment right now, and also artistic expression as like a kind of new medium of artistic expression, they also can fit into an entertainment model. And I recognize the versatility of what I'm doing to fit into some of those avenues. And I think that that's very valuable, because then you can step out of a gallery, out of a museum world, and you can be in like a different, you can be in a different, sorry, I have to pause something. Should have told no one, don't call me right now. So what I realize is that I don't think of myself in one silo, like an art world silo, but rather I want to make work that's transcendent, or that can shift between these different silos. And the emergence of these kind of experiential happenings as entertainment, I see as like a real interesting possibility for my work. But at the end of the day, my goal, and I'm not saying I reach it, because I think that this is a real lifelong thing that hopefully I'll keep developing towards it, is to really offer conceptual tools to aid and advance people as they evolve and improve. And I am using the museum as a venue and a vehicle for that. The same way that I would use, you know, something like Super Blue or Meow Wolf or something like that, these different experiential happenings in a more entertainment realm, you know, I would do that as well. And that I think the goal of my work and several other artists, someone like James Turrell, is in order to have encounters with beauty and sublime, in order to help kind of incubate, fertilize, grow, and open parts of our being, our essence, our soul, to the possible nature of ourselves and the future. And a successful artwork for me is something that does that, even if it's infinitesimally small, even if it just has the possibility to like take your stress level down the slightest bit, or if you have any kind of takeaway, because this is what kind of keeps encouraging us forward to become better and better, and hopefully grow into who we need to become.
Thank you.
Well said.
And that's with varied degrees of success and failure. But this is like what gets me up in the morning,
Right.
you know.
Well, it's a hell of a mission statement. Does anyone else have questions that we can ask from the audience? I'm sure you all, I actually see at least one Gamelatron installation there in someone's house. It looks lovely. It's beautiful. So I know you got a lot of fans here. Would anyone like to talk about it? If you, perhaps you'd like to talk about if anyone else has experienced a Gamelatron before, or what kinds of things what your experience has been like, or any other questions. I don't want to be prescriptive.
Hi, everyone. This is Amy. Let me see if I can get my video started. Hopefully you can see us. Hi.
There you
And
are.
thank you so much for doing this. This is
Hi,
wonderful.
Amy.
Hi. Erin, I believe we have a mutual friend, Ronald Todd.
Sure.
Yeah, and he told me about your exhibit, so I have to experience it. One, I want to ask Sam if maybe I could lead like a small meditation
By all
in
means.
one of those spaces. That would be fantastic.
By all
And the other thing is, Sam, I love the way that you said you described something as like a bath, and I've experienced sound bathing, which is you're in a chamber of different gongs and somebody plays it and you're bathing in sound. So that was a wonderful description. And thank you so much, Erin, for talking about your work. It's so complex and you describe it so well. So I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, I'm
Thank you.
excited to have people come. I think one of the things I experienced recently, like I went to the Met the other day, and have even just, I took my daughter to the Natural History Museum down in the city. I live in Brooklyn. And now that some of these institutions are open, like the Lyman Allyn is open, you cherish it more, because you realize like, oh, it kind of, life sucks when you don't have these things. And two, you're a little more spoiled, where you can have, the time viewing means you can take more time kind of alone by yourself or with less people, which sometimes it's great to be around big crowds of people and stuff like that. But for some of these artistic experiences, especially, it really lends, my work, I think, really lends to having a smaller grouped experience. And so I feel like this is, in a weird way, a special opportunity to have it when those numbers are lower, and you can have that kind of experience. Also, I welcome people to apply their training, if they're a meditation trainer or coach, or, there's so many different people that are really well versed in those kinds of skills. I am not one of them, but the work that I make, I try to do it in an open enough way so that it can aid and abet those other skills and can be part of like an enhancement towards them. So I encourage you to check it out. And if you have some ideas about how you could work with it in within your own kind of specialty area, I love those kind of things, and I encourage that happening.
If I may just follow up on the bath idea, because it is very true. I mean, it's how it feels in a way. I wanted to mention that water as a metaphor is very strong in Indonesian discussion of gamelan. And in a way, if you can imagine after a nice healthy rainstorm and the water is dripping off the roof and it's somewhat, abating to the point where it's not a constant, drip, 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 but it's more of an unpredictable one. One gets, at least this one, gets that same feeling when walking into Aaron's Gamelatron, because there's this movement, this fluidity of sound that's kind of unpredictable. And it's wonderful in that unpredictability as well. So after you take the bath, then you get to hear it just sort of drip and drab a little bit more, and you linger in it with a wonderful feeling. So
one note, and this is something that we didn't mention, is that I write all the compositions on site. Meaning it's not like I have compositions like a band would in a studio and then they go play it live on stage and they're trying to sound like the album to some degree and working with like a different sound system or acoustic environment. But rather I sit right there in the room and listen to the acoustics of that space and also the intention of the museum and what makes sense based on the other things happening or how the sounds travel into the other areas of the museum. And so the experience is really customized for that space. And Sam walked in and he was like, oh God, the acoustics of this room have never sounded better. And I was like, well, I like the acoustics of the room, but I wrote the music for the room. So it's not necessarily even that the acoustics sound great. It's like the acoustics of the room are a vital part of the instrument now, rather than just being like a hull for a song that was written outside of that room. It is part of the room. And so hopefully that also like makes it more successful, because that like what you are hearing is for that space, both in temperament as well as acoustic treatment.
Yeah, that was something else I was thinking about when you were talking earlier about, I was thinking about how the music fills the space, but it is essentially like each piece that you design, each piece that you install in a different space is not just for that space, but the sound sort of inhabits the shape of that space, and it becomes a kind of that space is the artwork too, and the sound, how the sound interacts with it. Can you talk a little bit about how you work with different size spaces like that? I mean, we're talking about a room. The big installation here is 25 by 45 feet, but you design obviously for living spaces and small scale spaces. How do you approach it? Is there a different kind of approach each time, or do you have sort of a basic approach that you can apply to something where it's more of a public setting and then more of an intimate sort of living space?
Yeah. Well, it's all about scale, I think. I get a good sense just of like the size of the space, like, how big of an artwork would make sense there sonically. And so that's one thing. You don't try to like put too much or too little into a place. And this is like, I have a background in like, I used to do live sound and had like a sound system and would do, setting up sound systems for different venues, and same thing. You don't want to show up with too many or too little speakers. And it's the same kind of concept where I have a pretty healthy idea of like how loud the gongs play and what kind of acoustic environment is and how big it is and what kind of experience it'll make based on how big of an artwork. And so I try to make the artwork scale to what I think's appropriate for that experience. And if there's not enough or too much, both of them don't work. And so the artwork is pretty variable. I've done multi-thousand square foot spaces with over 100 gongs all networked together in these like massive kind of settings, as well as smaller, more intimate settings, living rooms, things like that. And it's really just about being appropriate and being honest about what is going to work best. and there is for me like it can't go infinitesimally small because you don't have enough sonic sources really to be able to create a dialogue between different sounds. So like the smallest pieces I really make really have like 6 maybe gongs, 7 gongs, and then there's really no limit as far as going up. Because I can't necessarily make each gong louder. All you can do is, duplicate them over and over and cover more space. And in that way, it's a lot of fun because it becomes these multi-point sonic systems. So not like 5.1 surround, it becomes like 80 different sonic things. So you really feel the physical presence of like a sound that comes from behind you versus in front of you. That becomes part of the composition, is the locality of it. And I think Sam was experiencing that too, and noticing like, just even the way that a sound will bounce off the reflect off walls will be different based on where you're sitting as well. So you really think a lot about how people move through the space, and that the sounds will be different based on how you move through the space. Where it's not as pronounced with that if you just have like a stereo system with 2 speakers, just even having like a row of gongs and having them separated by 8 or 9 feet has a real dramatic presence in the way in which it reflects off walls and such.
I've really enjoyed sort of being able to see the movement of some of the mallets and the gongs, and the way once the large ones at the top kind of move and sway a little bit after they've been hit, I feel like is a really satisfying thing, to be able to connect a little bit of movement with those sounds and sort of, be able to identify where they're coming from is.
I've done a bunch of pieces where I have interactive lights, and each time a gong plays, there'll be some kind of light signifier, be it on that gong or inside the gong, or be it in some other light grid somewhere else. And I think that also helps people kind of follow what's happening, especially when it's playing either really sparse or really lively. When it's lively, it just feels like it's coming from everywhere. It's playing really sparse, you're almost like you hear something, you're like, wait, where'd that come from? So sometimes having these lights help be indicators. And I think it draws people in too, because you're almost like waiting to see something move. And it's that kineticness that like lures you into spending more time with the work than you might be with, like, say, a painting, which is still. And even though you can engage with it in different ways, this really, it's a little more fun because you're like, when is this going to move? And then the mechanics of it is very simple, but I find it sometimes really soothing too, of just seeing them, especially with these, you have all these keys with these little mallets, seeing them just kind of like, pulse like these little hands. It's like watching someone play the piano, but not looking at their fingers, and instead looking inside the piano and just seeing these mallets moving and the rhythm of that movement, which like obviously like corresponds 100% with what you're hearing. It's a way to have like almost like a synesthesia,
Well, obviously, Aaron, we're thrilled that you have given us this gift here at Lyman Allyn. As we're coming to the end of this particular opening, I wonder whether or not you would care to share with us anything that's in the future for you. I mean, are you going to be doing another installation at Burning Man or something like that you're getting really excited about, or what?
Oh, the future, Sam.
The future, yeah.
Woo! I will say this. This is the first Gamelatron that I have shared in public since 2019. And that's not because I didn't have plans.
Right.
But you guys kept the plan, whereas most of the other things that I had did not. With one exception, I had one kind of like a short term, like a 3-day event, which was delayed, but I had a Gamelatron out. But outside of that, the future's unknown, and I have to be honest that all the things that I had planned, they're all tentative.
Right.
you know,
Well,
and
and-
I'm glad that this came through and that it's there.
Good.
But you know, I feel like 2021, you know, I'm not sure what it holds, and if anything, I am, you know, trying to as gracefully be in the moment as I can, because whenever I make plans, they seem not to work out. Can anyone relate? Anybody? Anyone? um, yeah. So I don't have a ton of things to share besides just saying I'm devoted to the work, and I hope that I have more to give.
Well, I, for one, hope that you do more in the future. And, you know, I'm thrilled that you're able to, you're allowing us to enjoy your work here. I look forward, I think you're going to be coming up here next week, I think. Are you to do a video documentary of it? Good.
On Tuesday, I'll be documenting the pieces for an independent project with a videographer who's been making like kind of working on a Gamelatron documentary.
Great.
So.
And I think we're going to try to have you come back too for another artist talk, perhaps about this, maybe another Zoom one, or who knows, if we get lucky, we could actually do one in person, depending on the timing.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, we shall see about the future. And if you guys can't get up, if anybody here can't make it, that's fine. I'm gonna be putting out a lot of media, whatever we can, to be able to share. I know also I gave Jane and Tanya a link. I did some recording of one of the pieces that I wrote in the space, and just made it available for download. And so yeah, that's something that if you want to listen to that with nice headphones, so you can hear all the bass.
Right.
We you know, we can make that available. Maybe if there's even a place to put up a link on this Zoom, so you guys can grab it.
Yeah, it'll definitely be on the website if it isn't already. I think we sent it to Becca, didn't we?
I think
We
so.
didn't. It was just an oversight, and she'll be getting it very soon. So she'll be putting it up. But it is wonderful. If you all, I mean, I would encourage you to go and listen to it, because it is, it's, I mean, it sounds silly to say, or a little bit trite, but it really sounds so just magical to be in the space with the music. They feel like they're just uplifting, and your mood is instantly improved. It's such a wonderful experience. I hope you can all join us at some point soon in person at the museum. But if you're too far away, please enjoy, you know, these other things that we're going to be offering. Both Aaron's, I see Aaron's link is up now on the chat, and also, you know, check our website for more things that we're offering in connection with the show.
Yeah, and I just sent the link, so so you have it.
Yep,
Great.
there it is.
Well, thank you, Aaron. Thank you all for this wonderful way to end the week. I hope you all have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon in various art venues. Hopefully one of them will be here at the Lyman Allyn.